He was a quiet boy who lived in a small town where most people knew each other. The streets were simple, the houses were old, and life moved slowly. There were no big music schools, no rich students taking private lessons, and no famous musicians walking around. But in the center of that quiet little place stood an old house, and inside it, against the wall of a dim living room, stood a broken piano. It did not look special to anyone else. Its paint was peeling, a few keys were chipped, and some strings inside were loose. But to him, that piano was priceless. He had found the piano when he was 6 years old. It belonged to his grandfather, who used to play it decades ago, before age had weakened his hands. When the boy touched the keys for the first time, he did not know how to play anything. He simply pressed random notes, surprised by how each key gave a sound. As he grew older, his connection to that piano became deeper. He began to teach himself small pieces, copying melodies he heard on the radio or watched on television. The sound was never perfect. Sometimes a key made a strange noise. Sometimes the pedals didn't work. The piano was so old that one wrong movement could deaden the whole instrument. But the boy never cared. Every night after finishing school homework, he sat there and played. His family never stopped him. They had little money and could not replace the piano, but they understood how important it was to him. In the evenings, his parents would sit quietly and listen to him practice. They would not say anything out loud, but deep inside they felt proud. They believed music was shaping him into a thoughtful human being. Still, the outside world was not kind. Not everyone respected him or his piano. When he started school, he discovered how cruel children could be. Other kids in his class had newer things, not only in music, but in life. Their shoes were new, their school bags clean, and their parents drove cars instead of walking. He, on the other hand, had old shoes, a simple school bag, and a father who worked hard to keep food on the table. The children did not tease him at first, but everything changed the moment they discovered his love for the old piano. It started one morning when one student asked him what he usually did after school. Without a second thought, he answered proudly that he played piano in the evenings. His classmates asked him about it, thinking it must be an expensive instrument or something impressive. "So you have a piano at home?" A girl asked him, surprised. "Yes," he replied, smiling. But when they asked more questions, his answers made them laugh. "It's very old," he said. "It doesn't work well, but I love it." He did not think that would be a problem. To him, the piano's age was a beautiful thing. It held memories. It held history. But two children who had shiny toys and expensive gadgets. An old piano sounded like a joke. The laughter began softly that day, but it grew louder over the weeks. At break time, he would sometimes sit alone with his lunch, while a few boys whispered to each other and then laughed loudly. One boy said, "How do you even play on that thing? Does it smell like dust?" Another would pretend to play air piano and mock the sound, producing strange and broken noises. They even gave the piano a nickname, the trash box. He heard their words, but he refused to react. Instead, he stored every painful sentence inside his heart and turned it into fuel to keep playing. He knew if he argued with them, it would only make things worse. If he tried to prove himself, they would push harder. So he did what he always did. He went home and touched the piano keys. Even when the keys hurt his fingers, he kept practicing. Even when one note came out with a buzzing sound, he tried again. The broken instrument became more than just an object. It became his friend, his voice, and his comfort. He would sit there for hours, sometimes forgetting about dinner or sleep, lost in the world of unfinished melodies. There were nights when the piano sounded so gentle that it calmed the whole house. On those nights, he played as if speaking to the piano, telling it everything he was feeling. And the piano answered, not through perfect sound, but through emotional honesty. But not everyone appreciated the sound. Next door lived an older woman who did not like children making noise. She often banged on the wall and shouted for him to stop. She told his parents the piano was pointless. She claimed he would never become anyone in life if he kept wasting time. The boy heard her once, and although she was not speaking to him directly, her words stung. He remembered walking back to the piano after hearing her, sitting down and staring at the keys. For the first time, he questioned himself. Was he really wasting time? Was music nothing but noise to everyone else? He placed his fingers on the piano slowly, unsure if he should play again. But then, he pressed one key, then another, and within minutes, the music returned. Washing away his doubt like rain washing dust off a window, music gave him something the world could not easily take away: peace. However, peace did not last long at school. One day, a music activity was announced. Students would get a chance to play any instrument for the teacher. The class became excited. They talked about guitars, keyboards, flutes, and drums. Some students even bragged about how expensive their instruments were. When they asked him what he would bring, he simply said, "I will play the piano." The class burst into laughter. One boy asked him, "Will you drag your trash piano to school?" Another said, "Maybe the keys will fall off on the way here." They made jokes for days. Some even drew mocking pictures and left them on his desk. Every joke hurt. But each night when he returned home, the piano reminded him who he really was. When he sat down to play, his fingers moved with more emotion than ever. He was no longer playing for fun. He was playing to survive the pain of being misunderstood. His family noticed the change in his playing before anyone else did. His mother sometimes peeked through the doorway and listened. She noticed his style had shifted. His music sounded heavier, richer, stronger. It carried emotion. It carried truth. But even then, none of them imagined that the broken piano, mocked by the town, would one day change everything. There were days when he struggled, of course. Days when he woke up and felt unmotivated. Days when he wondered why the world seemed designed to destroy dreams. Once, after a difficult day at school, he ran home and sat in front of the piano, but he did not play. He simply stared at the keys for a long time. He wondered if he should quit. He wondered if music was just a childish fantasy. He imagined what life would be like if he stopped playing forever. Maybe the teasing would disappear. Maybe school would become easier. Maybe those mocking voices would finally fall silent. But deep inside him was something stronger than fear. Something older than doubt. It was a connection to music that he could not explain with words. He did not know why he felt this way. He did not know how he learned to play without lessons. The note simply lived inside him, waiting to be released. So even on the days when he questioned everything, he still returned to the piano. One night, while everyone was asleep, he walked quietly to the living room and sat down at the piano. Moonlight came through the window, painting silver shadows on the keys. He breathed in deeply, placed his fingers gently on 2 notes, and played the softest melody he had ever played. It was only a few simple notes, nothing fancy, but they came from the heart. And as the sound filled the silent house, he realized something important. Music did not need to be perfect to be powerful. The broken piano had scars. He had scars too. But scars are not signs of weakness. They are signs of battles survived. That night, as he played, he imagined a future where people listened to him not because of a perfect instrument, but because they could feel his soul through his music. He did not know if that future would ever happen. He did not know where music would take him, but he made a quiet promise to himself in that moonlit room. He would never stop playing. No matter how loud the world laughed at him, and without realizing it, that promise became the first step of a journey that would one day change his life, the town, and even the world far beyond its borders. The story of a boy and a broken piano had begun, and the world was not ready for what his music would eventually become. The boy's life was still quiet, but something inside him had begun to change. He had been practicing on his broken piano for years. While the teasing at school never completely stopped, he had learned to let it roll off his back. Music had become more than a hobby. It had become a refuge, a place where he could speak without words, where he could feel alive even when the world seemed cruel. One evening, while the sky outside was painted with shades of orange and pink, he was sitting on the old piano bench, pressing keys slowly, one by one. The notes came out unevenly, some squeaky, some soft, but together they created something beautiful. He paused, closed his eyes, and imagined a crowd listening to him. Not laughing, not judging, but truly listening. He did not know where the thought had come from, but it gave him a strange hope. For the first time, he imagined that his music could reach beyond the walls of his small house. The next morning, he was walking to school when he noticed a small poster on a lamppost. It was about a local talent event. "Show your talent," it said. There was a small fee to enter, and participants could perform anything: singing, dancing, instruments, or even poetry. The boy stopped and stared at the paper. His heart beat faster. Could he do it? Could he play his broken piano in front of strangers? All day at school, he could not think of anything else. His classmates kept asking him what he was staring at, and he kept giving vague answers. Inside, he was planning. He decided he would enter the contest no matter what. At home, he ran to the piano and began practicing harder than ever. He wanted to make sure the melody he would play was perfect, at least in the way he felt it. His mother watched quietly, noticing the intensity in his eyes. His father, busy with work, gave him a nod from the doorway, a silent encouragement that said, "You can do this." The next week passed slowly. Every day he carried his music in his mind. Sometimes he would hum it softly while walking. Other times he would tap his fingers on the desk, imagining the sound of the piano keys. He began to feel nervous, but also excited. For the first time, he had a chance to show the world a piece of himself. Finally, the day of the event arrived. He carried his broken piano carefully, his hands gripping the sides, making sure none of the keys shifted or cracked further. When he entered the small auditorium, he saw many other participants. There were children with shiny guitars, girls with violins, and even a boy juggling while playing a drum. He felt a pang of doubt. How could his old broken piano compare to all this? The moment he stepped onto the stage, he felt the weight of all eyes on him. Some people whispered to each other. A few even laughed quietly when they saw the worn-out instrument. He took a deep breath and looked out at the audience. The piano was his old friend, and he trusted it. He had to trust it. He sat down, placed his fingers on the keys, and began to play. At first the notes were soft and hesitant, almost timid, but as he continued, something magical happened. He forgot the audience. He forgot the laughter. He forgot everything except the music. His fingers moved with confidence and feeling. The broken keys did not matter anymore. The sound came from his heart, and it was perfect in that way. The audience was silent. Some were surprised by how beautiful the music sounded, coming from such an old piano. Others were moved, feeling the emotion in every note. The boy closed his eyes and let himself go. He played melodies he had created, ones he had never shared with anyone, ones that carried his dreams, his fears, and his joy. For a few minutes, the auditorium was filled with the sound of a boy and his piano. And then, when the last note faded, there was silence. The boy opened his eyes, unsure of what to expect, and then the applause began. It started quietly, a few claps here and there, but soon it grew louder. People were standing, clapping, cheering, some even wiping tears from their eyes. The boy could hardly believe it. For the first time, his music had reached people in a way he had only imagined. The same audience that had looked at his piano and laughed now cheered for him. He smiled, feeling a warmth in his chest he had never felt before. After the performance, a kind man approached him. He was an older musician, someone who had played in orchestras and taught music for many years. "That was incredible," he said. "You have something special. Not everyone can make a broken piano sound like that. You have a gift, and it is rare." The boy felt shy but proud. He thanked the man quietly, feeling a new sense of confidence. Maybe he was not just a boy with a broken piano. Maybe he could really make a difference with his music. The story of his performance spread slowly at first. Neighbors who had heard about it came to congratulate him. Some classmates who had laughed before now looked at him with respect. Even the children who had mocked him were surprised. They did not understand fully how he had done it, but they could see the truth. The boy's talent was undeniable. At home that night, he sat at the piano again. He did not play the same melody as before. Instead, he experimented, exploring new sounds, new combinations of notes. He felt free. For the first time, he realized that his music was not just for himself or for the school. It could reach further, touch people's hearts, maybe even change how they saw the world. The broken piano no longer felt like an obstacle. It felt like a part of him, a symbol of his determination and passion. He knew that the world would continue to have doubters, people who laughed at what they did not understand. But he also knew that music had the power to rise above that. Over the next few weeks, he continued practicing every day. He recorded small melodies on his phone, sometimes sending them to the kind man who had encouraged him. He even started sharing his music online in small groups at first. He was careful, nervous about how people would react, but the response was better than he had imagined. Messages came from strangers praising his talent, saying how moved they were by his music, and asking him to share more. This little recognition gave him hope. It made him feel that his music could really have an impact. He began to dream bigger. He thought about entering larger contests, performing in front of bigger audiences, maybe even recording an album one day. But despite the growing attention, he remained humble. He still played the old piano at home, late at night, when the house was silent. He knew that without the hours of quiet practice, without the failures and the mistakes, he would never have reached the point he was at now. The piano had taught him patience, perseverance, and the courage to keep going even when others mocked him. One afternoon, as he was walking home from school, a small group of younger children ran up to him. "Can you teach us to play?" One of them asked shyly. "We want to be like you." The boy smiled. He realized that his music was already inspiring others. He began showing them simple melodies, teaching them how to feel the music rather than just play notes. He felt proud, not because of himself, but because he could share the joy of music with others. The broken piano had started as a source of ridicule, but now it had become a bridge. It connected him to the audience, to strangers, and even to children who had never touched an instrument before. It showed him that beauty could come from unexpected places, and that passion could overcome obstacles. Even his parents noticed the change in him. They saw how confident he had become, how he no longer let teasing or judgment affect him. They saw a boy who was growing into a young man with purpose. Someone who understood that talent was not measured by perfection, but by dedication and heart. Every evening he continued to sit at the piano, exploring new melodies, new emotions, and new possibilities. He began writing his own songs, inspired by what he had learned from life, from laughter, from pain, and from hope. Each note he played carried a piece of his story, a piece of his soul. And so, the boy and the broken piano moved forward together. What had once been mocked and laughed at was now celebrated. What had been considered useless was now seen as powerful. The journey was just beginning, but he had already learned a vital truth. Music could transform not only him but the world around him. The broken piano, the one that everyone had dismissed, had become a tool of change. It had taught him resilience, inspired others, and opened doors he had never imagined. The boy realized that every mistake, every squeaky key, every cracked note had contributed to his growth. Without them, the music would not have had the same depth, the same emotion, or the same power. From that day forward, he knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, he had already overcome the hardest one, believing in himself when no one else did. And with every note he played, he carried that lesson forward, transforming fear and doubt into music that touched hearts and left a mark on the world. After the school performance, the boy's life started to change, but not all at once. At first, it was quiet recognition. A few neighbors came by to compliment him. Some classmates who had laughed before now nodded or whispered words of admiration. Even the music teacher who had once doubted him seemed to look at him differently. One day, as he was walking home with his broken piano, a man approached him. He looked older, perhaps in his 40s, with kind eyes and a gentle smile. In his hands, he held a small flyer for a community music event. "I saw your performance at the school," the man said. "I think you have real talent. Would you like to perform at the local cultural hall? It's a small audience, but it's a start." The boy felt a mix of excitement and fear. He had never played for people outside of school, and even then it had been nerve-wracking. What if the audience laughed? What if the piano broke in the middle of the performance? What if he failed? But he remembered the nights at home, when he had let the music flow without thinking about anyone else. He remembered the applause at the school, the warmth it had given him, and the encouragement from the older musician. Slowly, a smile formed on his face. "Yes," he said, "I will do it." The days leading to the event were filled with preparation. He practiced every evening, experimenting with new melodies and refining old ones. The piano still groaned and creaked under his fingers, but he had learned to work with it, to turn its flaws into part of the music. Sometimes a key would stick, producing an unexpected sound, but instead of frustration, he used it to create something new, something unique. On the morning of the performance, he packed the piano carefully, making sure every key and pedal was secure. His parents helped him carry it to the cultural hall, which was not far from their home. The hall was small, with wooden seats and a stage that had seen better days. He felt nervous as he stepped inside. There were already people there, setting up chairs and preparing instruments. Some were older musicians, others were children like him, and a few were simply visitors from the town. He was curious to see the performances. When it was his turn to play, he carried the piano onto the stage. Some people whispered, noticing its worn appearance. A few even chuckled softly, expecting a poor performance. He ignored them and placed his hands on the keys. He started slowly, letting the music flow naturally. At first it was quiet, almost shy. But as he continued, something remarkable happened. The music filled the hall, and people began to listen, not just with their ears, but with their hearts. The broken notes, the squeaks, the uneven rhythm, all of it came together in a way that felt alive. It felt real. As he played, he noticed faces in the audience changing. People who had whispered or laughed now looked amazed. Some had their eyes closed, letting the melody move them. Others leaned forward, unable to stop listening. The boy felt a surge of confidence. He was no longer playing for himself or to prove anything. He was playing to share his story, to express what he had felt for years. When the last note faded, there was silence for a moment. Then the applause began. It was louder than anything he had ever heard, heartfelt and genuine. People were clapping, cheering, and even some were standing. The boy felt his chest tighten with emotion. He had never imagined that his music could have this effect on others. After the performance, several people came up to him. One elderly woman said, "You have a gift, child. Your piano may be broken, but your music is whole. Never stop playing." Another person, a young man with a guitar, asked if he could learn from him. Even a few children, shy and curious, asked him to show them a few notes. The experience changed something inside him. He realized that music was not just about skill or instruments. It was about connection. It was about reaching people, touching their hearts, and making them feel something they could not always explain. And he had done that with a piano that others had mocked, with fingers that had once been small and clumsy, and with years of quiet practice in a small, lonely room. News of his performance began to spread. A local newspaper wrote a short article about the boy with the broken piano, highlighting how he had turned ridicule into beauty. People from other parts of the town began to come to his home, asking if he could play for them, if they could hear his music. It was overwhelming at first, but he learned to handle it. Each performance, each listener, gave him more confidence. As his music reached more people, opportunities began to grow. A small music teacher offered to help him improve his technique. A local store allowed him to set up a small corner where he could play for anyone who came by. Even local radio stations invited him to perform, sharing his music with a wider audience. But the boy remained humble. He never wanted to leave the broken piano behind. To him, it was more than an instrument. It was a symbol of perseverance, of passion, and of believing in oneself when the world laughed. He understood that the piano's imperfections were part of its charm, just as his own mistakes and struggles were part of his growth. Every night, after performing, he returned home and played for himself. No audience, no applause, just him and the piano. He explored new sounds, wrote new melodies, and allowed himself to dream even bigger. He imagined performing in larger halls, sharing his music with more people, and inspiring others to follow their passions. No matter what obstacles they faced. One afternoon, while practicing, he heard a soft knock on the door. It was a boy from school, someone who had once laughed at him. The boy looked nervous, holding a small notebook. I wanted to learn," he said quietly. "I want to play piano like you." The boy smiled. He nodded and motioned for him to sit. Together, they began to play. Slowly at first, learning the basics. He realized that his music was not just changing him or his life. It was touching others, teaching them, inspiring them. The broken piano had become a bridge between people, a way to share emotions and experiences. As weeks turned into months, his music began to reach even further. Videos of his performances were shared online by friends and neighbors. People from other towns, even other countries, began to comment, praising his talent and asking for more. The boy could hardly believe it. What had started as a quiet passion in a small living room was now reaching people far beyond his imagination. Despite all the attention, he never let it change who he was. He remained the same boy who had first touched the broken piano, the same boy who had faced laughter and doubt, the same boy who had believed in music even when no one else did. His humility and dedication only made his music more powerful. One evening, after a particularly moving performance at the community hall, he walked home with his piano. The streets were quiet, the sky filled with stars. He thought about how far he had come from being mocked and laughed at to inspiring people and touching hearts. He felt gratitude, not just for his talent, but for the piano, for the people who had believed in him, and even for those who had doubted him, because they had given him the courage to prove himself. He placed the piano carefully in the living room and sat down. This time, he did not play a melody anyone else would hear. He played for himself, for the joy of music, and for the love he had carried for years. The sound was imperfect, as always, but it was honest, and it filled the house with warmth. As he played, he thought about the future. He knew there would be more challenges, more obstacles, and more moments of doubt. But he also knew something else. He had discovered something powerful within himself. Music was not just sound. It was life, expression, and connection. And he had learned how to turn brokenness into beauty. How to take laughter and ridicule and transform it into something that could touch the world. The boy and his piano had already begun to change more than just his life. They were changing the way people saw talent, passion, and perseverance. They were showing that even the most unlikely instruments, when combined with dedication and heart, could create something extraordinary. And so, the journey continued. Each note he played, each performance he gave, was another step forward. The broken piano, once mocked and dismissed, had become a symbol of hope, a reminder that true beauty often comes from unexpected places. As night fell and the town grew quiet, he played his piano one last time before bed. The music floated through the room, soft and gentle, carrying dreams, hopes, and a promise. A promise that no matter what came next, he would continue to play, to inspire, and to touch the hearts of everyone willing to listen. The boy knew that this was only the beginning. There were larger stages to play on, bigger audiences to reach, and more people to inspire. But no matter how far he went, he would always return to his broken piano. The one that had believed in him when no one else did. The one that had given him the courage to rise above laughter, doubt, and fear. And as he drifted to sleep, he dreamed of music that could change everything, just as it had already begun to change him and the world around him. The boy's life had changed, more than he could have imagined. What had begun as quiet evenings spent with a broken piano had turned into performances in front of audiences, both small and growing. People from his town and beyond were listening to his music, and for the first time, he began to understand how far his talent could reach. Yet, despite all the attention and admiration, he remained the same boy who had learned to play on an old, imperfect instrument. His heart had not changed, and he still played for the joy of music, for the stories he could tell through melody, and for the connection he could create with listeners. One morning, as sunlight spilled through the window, he received an unexpected letter. It was from a music academy in a nearby city. The letter praised his talent and offered him a chance to attend a summer workshop with professional musicians. He read the words over and over, hardly believing them. The academy was known for shaping young musicians, and being invited was an honor. He felt nervous and excited at the same time. Could he leave his small town? Could he play with other talented children who had perfect instruments, who had lessons from a young age? His parents encouraged him gently. "You have worked hard," his mother said. "This is your chance. Don't be afraid," his father added. "Remember, no piano, no matter how perfect, can teach you what your heart already knows." With their support, he packed his small bag and carefully transported the broken piano to the workshop. It was not easy. People looked curiously at him as he carried the worn instrument, whispering among themselves. Some even seemed doubtful that he could keep up with the other students. But he paid no attention. He only focused on the music, on the melodies that had grown inside him over years of practice, patience, and perseverance. The workshop was unlike anything he had experienced. The hallways were filled with children playing violins, guitars, and grand pianos that gleamed in the sunlight. Professional musicians walked through the rooms, offering advice and encouragement. For a moment, he felt small, like his old piano might not belong here. But as soon as he stepped onto the stage for the first practice session, he let the music take over. When he played, the room grew silent. The other students stopped, listening to the raw emotion flowing from the broken piano. They were surprised to hear such depth of feeling from an instrument that many considered unworthy of attention. The boy's music spoke louder than any instrument's perfection. It told a story of struggle, resilience, and hope. By the second day of the workshop, he was invited to perform in front of the entire academy. The auditorium was large, filled with students, teachers, and visitors. Some people were curious about the boy with the old piano. Others were skeptical. He carried the instrument carefully onto the stage. Aware of every pair of eyes watching him, he closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and began to play. The first notes were soft, almost like whispers, drawing the audience in. As he continued, the music grew, weaving through emotions of sadness, joy, and hope. Every note told a story. Every pause created anticipation. Every melody left an imprint on the hearts of those listening. By the time he finished, the room erupted in applause. Some students were on their feet cheering. Others wiped tears from their eyes. Teachers smiled, some shaking their heads in disbelief at the talent that had emerged from such humble beginnings. The boy felt a warmth in his chest, a mix of relief, pride, and joy. He had not only survived the scrutiny of this new environment, but had also touched the hearts of people who had never known his story. After the performance, a renowned musician approached him. She had been observing quietly, listening with careful attention. "Your music is extraordinary," she said. "You have taken what others see as limitations and turned it into strength. That is rare. You have a gift that cannot be taught." The boy blushed but thanked her politely. Deep down, he understood that the music had always been inside him. The piano, broken as it was, had simply given him a voice to express it. Over the next few weeks, the workshop became a turning point. He learned new techniques, practiced with other students, and performed in various settings. Yet he remained humble. He never sought to compete with others or prove himself superior. Instead, he focused on growth, on understanding the language of music more deeply, and on sharing his own voice with honesty and sincerity. By the end of the workshop, the academy offered him a scholarship for further training. The boy could hardly believe it. He had traveled far from his small town, faced doubt and fear, and now had an opportunity that could change his life forever. He accepted, knowing that his journey was just beginning. When he returned home, the town welcomed him as a young hero. People who had once laughed at his piano now stopped to listen whenever he played in public. Children gathered around, asking him to teach them melodies. His performances began to draw larger crowds, not just from his neighborhood, but from nearby towns as well. The broken piano, once a symbol of ridicule, had become a symbol of inspiration. He also realized that his music had the power to heal. He was invited to play at hospitals, community centers, and charity events. Patients, children, and the elderly listened, some with tears in their eyes, some smiling as memories returned with the music. He understood that his talent was not just about personal success, but about giving joy and comfort to others. One day, a woman approached him after a performance at a local hospital. She held his hand tightly, tears streaming down her face. "Your music. It brought back memories I thought I had lost forever," she said. "You have a gift, and you are using it to heal." "Thank you." The boy felt a quiet pride. He had never imagined that something he loved so deeply could touch people in such profound ways. The broken piano had taught him patience, perseverance, and the importance of listening to one's heart. Now it was teaching him that music could reach beyond words, beyond age, and beyond circumstance. Despite all the attention and opportunities, he never abandoned the piano. It remained old, imperfect, and full of character. Every scratch, every worn key, every squeaky pedal reminded him of the years he had spent practicing quietly in his small living room, of the nights he had faced ridicule, and of the moments when he had doubted himself. The piano was not just an instrument. It was a part of his journey, a witness to his growth, and a symbol of resilience. He also began to write his own compositions. Inspired by his experiences, he created melodies that told stories of hope, struggle, and triumph. His music became more than performance. It became expression. People listened and felt connected, as if each note spoke directly to their hearts. He discovered that music had the power to communicate emotions that words could not capture, and he felt grateful to be able to share that gift. The boy's story reached even further when a journalist heard about him and wrote an article for a national newspaper. The article described a boy with a broken piano who had turned ridicule into artistry, inspiring people across towns and communities. Soon, letters and messages began arriving from people he had never met, musicians, teachers and strangers alike, praising his talent and encouraging him to continue. One evening, after returning home from a performance, he sat at his piano, reflecting on his journey. He thought about the boy he had been, shy and unsure, carrying a piano that others mocked. He thought about the nights of practice, the moments of doubt, and the first applause that had made him believe in himself. He realized that every challenge, every difficulty, had shaped him into the musician he had become. As he played, he felt a quiet sense of fulfillment. He had discovered something important, that true talent is not measured by perfection, but by heart, determination, and the courage to pursue what one loves. His music had the power to inspire, to comfort, and to connect people in ways that were beyond imagination. He also understood the responsibility that came with his gift. He could use his music to teach, to inspire others to follow their passions, and to show that limitations are often opportunities in disguise. The broken piano, once a source of ridicule, had become a symbol of possibility, proof that beauty and greatness could emerge from imperfection. In the years that followed, he continued to perform, compose, and teach. His music reached wider audiences, inspiring young musicians who had never thought they could achieve their dreams. He never forgot his roots, the small town, the broken piano, and the nights of silent practice. These were the moments that had built his resilience, his creativity, and his love for music. Eventually, he became known not just for his talent, but for the story behind it. People admired not only the boy who could play beautifully on a broken piano, but also the courage, persistence, and heart that he had shown. He had taken mockery and doubt and transformed them into something extraordinary through it all. The boy never sought fame or recognition. He sought only to play, to share, and to inspire. And in doing so, he changed not only his own life, but the lives of countless others. The broken piano, once laughed at and dismissed, had become a beacon of hope, a reminder that passion, perseverance, and belief in oneself can turn even the most humble beginnings into a journey that touches the world. As he sat at the piano one quiet night, playing melodies that carried years of experiences, he realized something profound. The world may not always understand talent, beauty, or heart at first glance. People may mock, doubt, or overlook, but true passion cannot be stopped. It grows, it touches, and it transforms. And so, with each note he played, he continued to tell his story not with words, but with music that would echo far beyond the small town, beyond the broken piano, and beyond the boy who had once been mocked. His journey, full of courage and heart, had come full circle, and in that music, he had found his place in the world. The broken piano had become history, not as a relic of failure, but as a symbol of triumph. And the boy, now a young musician with a gift that would never fade, had proven something extraordinary, that the power of music comes not from perfection, but from passion, perseverance, and the courage to play even when the world doubts you.